Welcome to another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy, and it's another season preview edition of the show. In this video, we're talking NFC East NFL division preview for the upcoming season, which is right around the corner. We're only 3 weeks away from the regular season. Ian Cameron, and back with me, former NFL and college football quarterback Philip Nelson, back on the show. Philip, good to have you with me again. NFC East, just overall thoughts going into the season. What do you think? It's an interesting division. You've got pretty much your contenders probably going to battle it out, Eagles, Cowboys, and then you've got the Giants and Commanders. I've got question marks galore about both of those teams.
Absolutely. I mean, there's question marks all across the division. There hasn't been a back-to-back winner in 18, 19 years. So
Yep.
There's definitely, the top two and the bottom two. There's an interesting rookie quarterback in this division that I'm really excited to watch. So I'm excited to chat it up with you today.
Now, we didn't pick this team first. We always go in alphabet because they're the Dallas Cowboys or because they get basically rammed down everybody's fucking throat all year on television with every talk show. Basically, they devote half of the show to 5 different Dallas Cowboys topics. It's absolutely insane, which is why I try to avoid a lot of those shows these days, like the plague. But we do go in alphabetical order, as you know, so that means we do have to start with the Dallas Cowboys here in the NFC East. Of course, last year, after a pitiful collapse by the Philadelphia Eagles in the second half of the season, allowed the Cowboys to emerge as the division champs. You look at the Cowboys here this year and what they've got returning to this football team. Obviously, the quarterback, Dak Prescott, they've obviously got already some major storylines here in training camp and preseason with the holdout of CeeDee Lamb, the contract impasse between him and the Dallas Cowboys. I think it's still going to get done, if you ask me, before week 1. But, I mean, I didn't expect it to still be dragging on this long. So maybe all bets are off, no pun intended, at this point, as far as the status of this contract negotiation with CeeDee Lamb. It doesn't help the process of getting it done when Jerry Jones is kind of mocking the process and a few weeks ago with some of his public comments to the media. But look, Prescott, we know he can be very capable. He can light it up. He can go on a red hot run. But we also know that he's also been interception prone at times. That's going to be something that we're going to have to examine going into this season. But you look at it, 15 interceptions last year. We'll see. He's got to clean that up a little bit. But again, it's all going to come down, to the offensive line for Dallas, which a few years ago, one of the elite offensive lines in the NFL, and just been a precipitous decline in that group. And look, coming into this year, there's still some question marks there with what we're going to see. Tyron Smith, Tyler Biadasz are 2 guys that have signed elsewhere and moved on. And those are huge losses. I think when you look at, the likes of Zach Martin, he's one of the guys that's been considered one of the best guards in the NFL, really, for several years. But we're talking about a guy that's 34. Last year was not one of his better seasons. Signs of wear and tear. A lot of tread on those tires, as I like to say, for some of these players when they start to show a little bit of decline. And that's the concern about Zach Martin right now for this team. Terrence Steele wasn't particularly good in that right tackle spot last year. He's going to have a bounce-back season for them. It was funny. I was reading some things about how the center, still a relatively young player, practicing snapping the football with mom at home. Pretty funny shit there. So I guess whatever works, whatever gets you in the right frame of mind and ready to perform at your highest level, right? Even if it means mom snapping snapping the football to mom. So pretty funny stuff there. So I think when you look at this Dallas offensive line, it didn't perform at a high level last year. And you're talking about an older Zach Martin. You're talking about having to replace 2 very key starters, 2 of your better starters, in my opinion. I think Tyron Smith and Tyler Biadasz were 2 of their better players last year on the O-line, and you got to replace both of those guys. So there's big-time question marks. Hopefully the CeeDee Lamb stuff gets figured out because he's by far your most productive, most dynamic, most explosive playmaker down the field in the passing game at wide receiver. Because if you don't, then you're going to need the veteran Brandon Cooks to step up, and he had an inconsistent, season last year for this Dallas Cowboys team. I do like their tight end, the Wisconsin product, Jake Ferguson. I do think they've got a pretty good player there in him, but where are the other options going to be at receiver? Who's going to step up for them? The running game. Obviously, it's part and parcel with the offensive line. The O-line has question marks. The run game will probably have question marks. Tony Pollard, didn't perform at the level that the Cowboys were hoping for last year. But he's moved on to Tennessee. They decided not to bring him back, but you bring back Ezekiel Elliott and you've got Rico Dowdle behind him. That's not a running back tandem I'm sold on. Now, Zeke Elliott is apparently in better shape from all indications. When he was at New England, Sergeant Belichick whipped him into shape, and literally and figuratively, to get in better shape, take better care of his body. And apparently he was in better physical condition with New England, and apparently carrying over into Dallas. But we're still talking about a guy that's had a lot of years, a lot of injuries, a lot of setbacks, and you're counting on him to be a guy that can carry you in the run game with an O-line that's got question marks galore in front of him. So big time concerns here for Dallas, especially with that O-line and with that run game. As far as the defense is concerned, their pass rush is very capable. They obviously led by the dynamic, incredible Micah Parsons, who had 14 sacks. He's absolutely one of the best players in the NFL on the defensive side of the football. There's no argument there. But Dorrance Armstrong moves on. You got DeMarcus Lawrence, who's now into his 30s. He's a feast or famine type of player. I've seen him, Phil, have 3 sack games before, 2 or 3 sacks, and then I've seen him just totally invisible certain games. So you need that production, game in, game out, more reliability for a guy like DeMarcus Lawrence. There's no question about that. I did think he had a better year last year, though, than the year before, so that's good to see regarding DeMarcus Lawrence performance. Sam Williams' injury in training camp is very disheartening for Dallas. They were, cycle him in as one of the guys they were going to count on to get pressure on quarterbacks, but his injury, and he's going to be out long term. That's unfortunate. He had 4.5 sacks last year, and again, he's a guy that only played, not a ton of snaps last year, and yet still got 4.5 sacks. He was supposed to be a big time, bigger impact on this team defensively, and now he gets hurt here in training camp. So very unfortunate to see that. I like their edge rush, and certainly as long as Parsons is on the field, and they're going to be capable in that regard. I think when you look at it, the secondary is going to be interesting. First, the interior of the defensive line. It's going to be interesting to see what they do there. Osa Odigizua, one of my favorite names in the NFL. He's very good in the interior, so I like what he saw. But from him, so if he can keep that going, the interior of the D-line should be good. The linebacking core has had some question marks over the years, and that goes back to when Jalen Smith was there, and of course Leighton Vander Esch had to retire early, medical retirement early because of all those neck injuries he had. So there's the linebacking cores had to do some retooling. There's no question here the last few years. They signed Eric Kendricks, but I don't know how much Eric Kendricks has got now. He's not the Eric Kendricks we saw, a few years ago. So what are you going to get from him? It's almost like they're trying to patch things up, with everything that's changed there. They've got Damone Clark also going to be there. They've got a couple rookies there. So I don't love that linebacking core by any stretch for this Dallas team. Then, of course, you got the secondary where we love Trayvon Diggs, but he's a bit of a gambler. Not that I love gamblers. I'm one myself. But at the end of the day, he's a feast or famine cornerback. Like, he can obviously make a good read, but sometimes he almost tries to guess based on reading the eyes of the quarterback where the ball's going to go, and sometimes he can get burned that way. We have seen that in the past from Trayvon Diggs. It was an unbelievable year, obviously, for Deron Bland. I thought he was the best player in that Dallas secondary last year. He had that crazy game where he had multiple pick sixes in the same game and multiple interceptions. Deron Bland was terrific. Stephon Gilmore, moved on. So we'll see what that means. But again, if Diggs stays healthy, Deron Bland stepped up. It's going to be interesting to see how they fare. That secondary could be still solid, could be a pretty good duo there. And then, of course, they have Jordan Lewis as well, who didn't play great. So it's going to be imperative, I think, for Dallas that we get a full season of health from Trayvon Diggs. And if Deron Bland can keep doing what he did last year, that's going to help, I think, that secondary probably be better better than some people will think. And then, of course, they've got Donovan Wilson, Malik Hooker back in the safety position for this Dallas team. Hooker's a pretty good player. I do like him. Wilson a little more spotty. Hooker does have a history, though, of a lot of injuries. So can he stay on the field? Another question. Look, I think the defense and the secondary is solid. I think up front, the pass rush is decent. I don't like the linebacking core. I think opposing tight ends are going to have a field day against this Dallas defense because if you're weak in the linebacker spot, the tight ends are going to have a field day. So that's something to keep in mind if you're a fantasy football guy or you're a player prop better. Tight ends versus the Dallas Cowboys could be good bets this year, could be good to include in your lineup as well. And then, of course, you've got the kicking situation, too. Let's not forget Brett Maher declined a few years ago, but Brandon Aubrey came in last year and was unbelievable straight out of the spring football. It tells you, give these spring football players a chance, especially if they play well. Brandon Aubrey was given that chance last year, and he was a great kicker for Dallas. No question about that. When I look at this team, though, and you look at earlier in the summer, their win total was 10.5. I don't think it's actually moved that much. I did bet an under 10.5 with Dallas's win total. I think that's asking a lot. Now, their schedule is not the worst as far as difficulty, but there are some tough games in it. There's no doubt. And I think when you look at this team overall, I know we've been able to bank, Phil, on great regular seasons from Dallas. And I know that in the past, the playoffs have been the major issue. They haven't had issues in the regular season, but they have had issues in the playoffs. I'm not so sure this regular season is going to go smoothly for Dallas. You got the CeeDee Lamb thing, which still hasn't been ironed out. You got question marks galore on the offensive line, which declined last year. I have no indication yet until I see it. They're going to be better this year. Zeke Elliott and Dowdle in the backfield now. That's not something I'm really excited about. You've got a defense that I think up front can get pressure, but one injury to Parsons and or DeMarcus Lawrence, and that's all of a sudden you don't have the depth there as far as edge rushers. The linebacking core, as I mentioned, is not great. Secondary is very capable, but Trayvon Diggs is a high-risk corner. He can be great. He can also look silly and get burned. And can Deron Bland be as good as he was last year? He's incredible. But can I see it for a second year before I'm ready to call him a perennial year-in and year-out Pro Bowl cornerback? That's all I'm asking. So I think when you look at Dallas, under 10.5, I think it's a little bit ambitious to expect and guarantee 11-6 or better for this football team this season. So for me, it's under 10.5. And then, of course, you got the repeat division winner futility that we've seen in the NFC East where it's difficult to repeat as well. So, yeah, I'm going to go under this win total for the Dallas Cowboys. I think there's a little more negative than positive that I'm seeing here as I read the tea leaves when it comes to Jerry Jones and his prized Dallas Cowboys team. Phil, what do you think here, Dallas Cowboys this season?
Boy, you really started us off hot there. I think you kind of hit everything on the head there. Obviously the CeeDee Lamb thing needs to get figured out. Their next highest receiver, their next best receiving person on the offense was Jake Ferguson. So not even a receiver. That's a little bit concerning. Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma. It'll be interesting to see if he can hold up Dak's blind side. So, questions on the offensive line, questions on the skill positions. Let's just face it, Zeke Elliott isn't the same as who he was. A lot of pressure on Dak Prescott this year. Being a quarterback myself, I think and him being the Dallas Cowboys quarterback, he takes a lot of flack, and I think Dak definitely has he's earned his stripes. Don't get me wrong, but it comes down to the playoffs. He looked like a deer in the headlights versus the Packers last year, and that wasn't good. So this offense, the question marks all over the place there. The CeeDee Lamb deal does need to get done. Offensive line has question marks. Defensively, really the biggest, offseason acquisition they had was Eric Kendricks. And like you said, he's not the same player he was. Obviously, Mike Zimmer, being the new defensive coordinator, is going to bring in that scheme that he's familiar with. So we'll see if he can kind of lead, the whole defense as the middle linebacker there. But, you're right. It almost seems like they're kind of patching up some things with some guys that haven't, performed at the best of their capabilities, over the last or, recently. So, and that schedule. And then you look at the schedule and, it's not the worst, but at the same time here, starting off the year, at the Cleveland Browns, that defensive line is going to get after them. Then they have the Ravens week 3, and then all of a sudden the Lions, the Steelers won't be an easy game. The 49ers, there's a little bit of a stretch there. That's going to be really interesting for them. But, I'm definitely taking the under 10.5. I think they're going to be a 9-8 team and potentially sneak in the playoffs, just depending upon how the rest of the NFC goes. But I'm 100%, with you on board with under 10.5.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's 11 wins is going to be a hard reach for this team, given all the question marks they've got. And look, Mike Zimmer is the defensive coordinator. We'll see how that works out. He was a terrific DC at Cincinnati a long, long time ago before he got the head coaching job with the Minnesota Vikings, and we really haven't seen him since. But so I guess you got to respect his acumen. But when you look at the personnel, they're going to need some guys to stay healthy. They're going to need the linebacking core is going to need work. I mean, it's just not good there, that position. Yeah. That worries me because how fucking much has this league, the NFL, become such a tight end heavy league? Like, look at all the incredible tight ends and look how important it is to have an awesome tight end or even two tight ends on your team.
Yeah.
As far as running your offense. Yeah.
So, and Trayvon Diggs coming off of an ACL, I know what that's like. It's not easy, especially year one. There's the mental aspect to it, but then there's also physically coming back from that.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to be able to guess, because you hit it on the head there too. I mean, he's definitely an aggressive corner that likes to guess and read the quarterback's eyes. And, if he's still taking those chances, I don't know if he's going to be able to recover quite as well, dealing with an ACL. So.
And that is concerning. I mean, what were your biggest I guess, obstacles in returning from an injury like that? You mentioned the mental, but physically, is it a case of, well, wait a minute, let me just make sure I can be comfortable on the field? Or is it just, wait a minute, am I ever going to get back to the level I think I'm capable of? Is it a bit of both?
Yeah, because, I tore my ACL basketball season my freshman year in high school. And so I was ready to play that first football season coming back in that fall. But in terms of athleticism, I definitely wasn't the same. And so, obviously medicine, and he has the best, the best doctors and trainers and everyone, physical therapy coming back. But, the mental aspect is huge, just trusting it again, getting that knee stable. I'm sure, it's going to be stable, but just in terms of speed, I think there's going to be with a position that relies on agility, quick cutting, all that stuff. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a tough thing to come back from, and we're going to find out pretty quickly, I think, where he's at.
Great point you made too, Phil, about the receivers, and that if, they better get CeeDee Lamb done. And then there's question marks about your number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5 options at wide receiver. Who's going to step up for the Dallas Cowboys that they last year after CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, was the guy that was their most productive pass catcher, if you will.
Right.
And he's the tight end. It's funny because actually Phil's going to do the Big Ten preview very soon as well. This reminds me of what Michigan's going to be going through this year from the Big Ten. They lost everybody at receiver, but that tight end of theirs, Colston Loveland, is so damn good that they're probably going to end up just relying on him so much. He could end up leading them in passing yards this year, or receptions maybe,
right,
for them. Dallas might have to really rely on Jake this year is my point.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said before, Dak, he loves his tight ends. He's historically really relied on them, and he's a great target. But just, teams might be able to key in on that, try to take away the tight ends. And I mean, I fully expect CeeDee to be there. But even past CeeDee and Jake, what do you have? You don't have a lot. And when you can't rely on the run game, like you said, offensive line average at best. If they can't run the ball, that's going to put a lot of pressure on Dak. So
that's why I'm not giving up on Tony Pollard yet. I know it didn't work out, but large part of why it didn't work out is because the O-line's just not really up to par, up to snuff. Let's be honest. I mean, let's see what he does now in a different spot. Then we can make a referendum on Tony Pollard's effectiveness or ability, as a running back with a lot of reps in the NFL. All right, next up, the New York Giants. Tale of 2 seasons under Brian Daboll. It's funny that 2 years ago, the New York Giants fans just fell in love with Brian Daboll. Just an unbelievable turnaround season. They had the disastrous tenures of 3 consecutive horrible coaching hires. When you go back to Ben McAdoo, Pat Shurmur was a disaster, and probably the worst of all was Joe Judge. I mean, that was awful. He had no business being an NFL head coach. He worked for Belichick, so all of a sudden, he's had an NFL head coaching material. Bull crap. and it showed up that way. He just
Right.
wasn't ready to be an NFL head coach. So now they bring in Brian Daboll, and what a turnaround in that first season. There's no question for the New York Giants, and everyone fell in love. The 4-13 they were before Daboll got hired, 9-7-1 the next season, make the playoffs, win a wild card game against Minnesota. Obviously, they got drilled by Philly in the divisional round, but still to get to the playoffs and win a playoff game. And people were singing the praises of Brian Daboll. So last year, obviously, it was the opposite. Things didn't work out right. They go to 6-11, and all of a sudden, people souring on the poor guy after he was head coach of the year material the year before. Shows you how fickle the fan bases can be. But look, there's a lot of people saying he's a one-year wonder. This is still the New York Giants. He caught some good fortune in the first year. They won some close games, and now people adjusted, and now all of a sudden it's going to be just bad stuff for the rest of the way for the Giants with Brian Daboll. I'm not so sure about that. I think he's a quality coach, so I do leave the door open. But there are some legit question marks here for the New York Giants. Daniel Jones looked comfortable in year one under Brian Daboll, but we didn't quite see that same quality performance. How will they cope to Saquon Barkley being gone? But I will say this. I mean, Saquon Barkley was never healthy consistently with the New York Giants either. So that's something that you're going to want to definitely make note of. I think when you look at what this team is going to have around Daniel Jones, the offensive line is going to have to continue to be melded and improved in going into this season. So it's going to be interesting to see what they have there. Obviously, they go into the draft. They needed some help at receiver. With all due respect to Isaiah Hodgins and Jalen Hyatt and Allen Robinson, Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, the guys that have been here for the Giants at receiver the last few years. You needed a bona fide difference maker, game breaker at receiver. And in comes the guy, of course, they drafted, Malik Neighbors. They hope he's going to be that guy for the New York Giants. And it'll be interesting to see, an offensive-minded head coach like Daboll. How are they going to be able to use him effectively? It's going to be the question. Again, the O-line doesn't have a great deal of depth, so they're capable when healthy, but they're going to have to continue to be that way. He doesn't get talked about, but he's capable at tight end, and Daniel Bellinger. Obviously, there's so many tight ends that get talked about as elite, and I don't know if Bellinger's there, but, I've seen some glimpses of him getting better and improving his game. But obviously now having Neighbors is going to help. No question for this Giants receiving core. And he could be a guy that has that ability to just strike right away, kind of like Garrett Wilson did, with the New York Jets. So not the other New York team. So definitely, I think he could hit the ground running right away. There's no question. One thing about Jones, though, with the torn ACL, mobility, are they going to be cautious with him, right, Phil? You just talked about it. Coming off an injury like that, are you a little bit more careful in how often you design RPO and quarterback runs for Daniel Jones coming off an injury like what he suffered last season? So that's definitely going to be something to factor in. I think when you look at Barkley being gone, let's say Barkley stays healthy in Philly, it's you're going to miss him, but will he stay healthy is a question. And in the meantime here, Devin Singletary, he's been around the block. I get it. Buffalo, Houston, multiple teams. But it's not going to matter unless the run blocking gets better. And the run blocking has not been adequate enough for the Giants, specifically last year. We'll see if that can improve a little bit. I like Andrew Thomas. He's a great left tackle. Evan Neal has not panned out as the right tackle. Question marks on the O-line, again, kind of like we just talked about with the Dallas Cowboys. And can they get everyone to play at a little bit of a higher level? Going to end up being the big question. New York Giants on the defensive side of the football, what I do like is they needed some pass rush. They needed to generate more pressure. They were not great as far as pressure rate last year, but they end up bringing in Brian Burns from the Carolina Panthers. Very nice addition to that pass rush, and to go with already a guy that has, carried them in the pass rush department last year, and a guy they clearly got right in the draft out of Oregon, Kayvon Thibodeau, who had an outstanding year last year for the Giants, 11.5 sacks last year for Kayvon Thibodeau. So now you get Burns, you get him, and all of a sudden you've got basically at both ends, both sides of the line of scrimmage, guys that can get after it. So big thumbs up to the pass rush. They did address it. They did improve it. The New York Giants in the offseason. And they're going to need every bit of that pass rush because the secondary's got holes galore. And that's something that people picked on with the Giants last year. Xavier McKinney's gone to the Packers. He was great for them last year. So definitely they got to replace him, and they're going to have to rely on a rookie, Tyler Nubin, able to do that. So you look at other pieces in that secondary, the cornerback spots. I mean, you've got young players. You got Drew Phillips. You've got guys like Cordell Flott, Deontay Banks, who got torched at times last year in that secondary. I mean, it's looking tough in that secondary right now for the Giants on paper, unless one of these young guys step up. And it's hard to get a read on that, prior to the season until you see the games unfold with your own two eyes. But they, Phil, are going to absolutely need some of these young guys to step up because that secondary does scare me a little bit. The good news is they got the pass rush, and they often say in football, a great pass rush can mask some questions in the secondary. They're going to have to hope like hell that those two guys, Thibodeau and Burns, can rattle the quarterback, throw him off his spot, and maybe protect this, susceptible, shaky secondary a little bit, throughout the course of the season. So that's going to be interesting to see. Bobby Okereke at linebacker, I like him quite a bit. They're actually not bad at the linebacker spot. But the secondary is the biggest concern, and the pass rush is going to have to be there because I don't trust anybody right now to cover guys one-on-one down the field. There's going to have to be, you might even have to blitz a little bit more if you're the Giants too to make sure you get home. I know you risk the one-on-one coverage down the field that way, but my goodness, you're going to have to do everything you can to help the secondary because on defense, by far, it's the biggest hole right now on this football team. And we're talking about a league that has progressively become more pass heavy the last few years. It's not obviously a sign where you want to be weak. The good news for the New York Giants is they play the NFC South, a horrendous division, top to bottom. There's going to be winnable games on their schedule there. They get teams like, Seattle and Minnesota. Again, and Minnesota has had a nightmare month of August with injuries and all kinds of issues in their training camp and preseason. They've been hit hard, man. And the Giants play them. So, the schedule is actually not bad for the Giants. There's no question. Their D-line's improved. The pass rush is better. But the secondary's weak. You're going to have to hope Malik Neighbors is great right away to help a receiving core. Can Devin Singletary be solid, serviceable as a lead back at this stage of his career and supplanting a guy like Saquon Barkley Jones off a torn ACL, with an O-line that's got all kinds of question marks and a guy, trying to protect for a guy off a torn ACL. So there's question marks galore. I like Dable. I want to kind of buy in, but I'm going to have to wait and see it. I'm totally neutral on the win total, Phil. I did not place a bet on the Giants win total. Their win total currently is sitting at 6.5 right now. The under is minus 145. The over is plus 115. Not ready to ask the Giants to be a 7-win team this year, but I'm also not betting under because I don't like betting unders win totals off a bad year with a coach I think is pretty good and pretty capable and a coach I respect. And I respect Dable. I'm not ready to say it's all of a sudden going to go downhill again for the Giants this year just because he had a bad year last year. Don't forget what he did in year one, turning a 4-win team into a playoff team that won a playoff game. Let's not forget that either. So for the Giants, I'm totally neutral coming into the season. But if you ask me right now, I'd lean slightly over with the 6.5. It's funny, the Giants and the Commanders, Phil, I think I would lean over when we'll get to Washington later, but I think both of these teams are going to be better. It's just going to be a question of will it result in the wins necessary to get over their win total. You can be better and play better, but it's not always going to, add up to improvement in your win total. So that's going to be the interesting thing to watch with this team, as well as the team we'll get to in a bit, Washington. But Phil, what do you think here, New York Giants?
Yeah, I think, Daboll is a great coach. I think last year he was kind of stuck in a bad situation with, injuries, especially to a starting quarterback. So I completely agree with you there. I'm not ready to say Daboll isn't the guy when clearly he came in and performed very well his first year. So can Malik Neighbors, live up to the expectations and be that true number one guy? That's a big question mark. It sounds like he's been having a pretty good preseason. Seen some videos of him running routes and, winning. So that's good. offensive line, once again, I don't know how much they really addressed the offensive line, but that was a huge problem for them. And, once again, as a quarterback, you don't have much of a chance, especially in the NFL, when you cannot have any sort of time to throw and go through your progressions. So can Daboll kind of neutralize that with play calling, things like that?
Quick screen game, right? Short passing game, get the ball out quickly. There's ways you can mask a porous offensive line, but it's going to take some creative play calling to do that. What about you? Have you been in situations where college team or one of the years you were playing the spring league or wherever where, wait, this O-line's got major problems. What are we going to do to compensate for that to make sure we're still effective, right?
Yeah, I mean, my senior year at East Carolina, we had kind of the injury bug and just a lot of new guys and young guys, and quick game was huge for us. The problem is when you go down and you have to start calling those intermediate to longer, pass plays, you need some time there. And so the other thing is, with that questionable offensive line, I always say this: a quarterback's best friend is the run game. You know what I mean? And so can Devin Singletary be that guy? And he's been around the block, like you said. He's not anyone necessarily that as a defense, I don't think would scare a defense as much. So that offensive line, I just think the offense overall, not a ton of talent there. So that's really, something that Daboll is going to have to navigate, figure out what works best for his team there. Defensively, I think they're great. I think, that front seven is going to be very good. And I think as long as they can kind of put their guys in positions to make plays and not have to rely on sending 5 or 6 guys to get to the quarterback is huge, because then that's going to allow them to drop into pass coverage, and keep things ahead of them. I love that Brian Burns signing. I think that completely changes the outlook of the defense. You already said it.
You either have to get a pass rush, upgrade the pass rush, or upgrade the secondary. You can't stand pat and do neither. You got to fucking do something with one of those position groups, and at least they address the pass rush, bringing in Burns, pair him with Thibodeau. You got something now.
Exactly, and there's a quarterback or a cornerback battle going on. I'm seeing, and I'm seeing a lot of good things out of Nick McLeod.
There better be, because I don't think there's anyone good enough pre-training camp to demand the starting spot.
Exactly. And Nick McLeod actually led up the least amount of pass yards per completion. He was right there. He was on his receivers. So I think that could be kind of a dark horse guy to fill in. But them losing the safety to the Packers, that's a huge one. That's one of their better players last year on defense in the secondary. So a lot of question marks there. I don't see them. I have them kind of penciled in as 6-11, and like you said, they could play better, but that might not necessarily transfer over into the win column. And the NFC South has a ton of question marks, but yeah, the Falcons on the rise. Buccaneers won't be an easy game. So I think, that I don't see them, doing anything too crazy this year. I think they have a lot of question marks still. I have them as a 6-11 team, and, we'll see if Daniel Jones can stay healthy, because I think this is his last crack at it this year.
Yeah, I think it's a big year for him. And to think about, he's got to come off a torn ACL in what could be the biggest year of his career. So not an easy situation with an O-line that's got, as we mentioned, some question marks. It'll be interesting. Brian Daboll's a creative offensive guy, and I think they're going to need every bit of that, the New York Giants, this year. I will say this, too, we talk about Singletary. We're, having to fill the shoes of Saquon Barkley. Eric Gray and Tyrone Tracy now it was just one preseason game last week, and I watched a good deal of it, the Giant preseason game last week that they played. I believe it was against Detroit. They looked really good, Eric Gray and Tyrone Tracy. So maybe some help for Singletary at the running back spot. They flashed. They had some speed. They had some burst. They got into the open field and they broke tackles. They made something happen. I think Eric Gray ran for a 30, 40-yard touchdown off the screen pass. So that's the kind of explosiveness that maybe Singletary can't always give you, but maybe one of these other guys can. So maybe they get involved into the rotation a little bit at running back for the Giants this year. All right, next up, it's the Philadelphia Eagles. And, obviously everything fell apart. It was not just physically on the field, they started losing and their confidence was totally waned. But there was obviously some major issues internally as well, because I think that locker room became fractured a little bit down the stretch too. There's no question about that. People weren't happy with some of the play calling. And speaking of play calling, I think that's one of the biggest improvements in the offseason the Philadelphia Eagles made. Because if you look at that team last year, I don't think the OC or the DC position were any good. Brian Johnson was not what Shane Steichen was as the offensive coordinator. Of course, Shane Steichen left before last year. He was the Philly OC prior to last year. He takes the Colts head coaching job. They have to replace a great offensive coordinator in Steichen. Brian Johnson was not up to the task. I thought too pedestrian. Everything was way too predictable. They lost a lot of the explosiveness they had under Steichen, a lot of the creativity, the different formations, the different things they would throw at you, the mixing of the run and the pass. I just thought Steichen did a brilliant job devising a game plan, devising a scheme, keeping defenses off balance. And I just don't think we saw that enough with Brian Johnson. And you don't even have to talk about the DC, because Matt fucking Patricia called plays last year on defense for Philadelphia. So that didn't go well, especially down the stretch when that defense struggled. I think that's one of the big reasons why for Philadelphia there's a good chance for them to have a better season after a disappointing finish last year. 11-6 actually is still pretty good overall, but considering what were they, 9-1 or 10-1 at one point, and they just had that just collapse there down the stretch, finger pointing. There was even people saying it was such a bad, horrendous finish, barely even making the playoffs, even though they looked like they were going to cruise to winning the NFC East, and they barely make the playoffs, and they get bounced and played terribly in that wild card game against Tampa Bay, their first wild card game, that even Nick Sirianni may not survive it. But Nick Sirianni's back, and more importantly, they make big upgrades at the coordinator spots. Say what you will about Kellen Moore, okay? I know, Dallas and the Chargers, he was the OC there. He's light years ahead of what they had last year in Brian Johnson. Is he perfect? No, but he'll certainly still be a hell of a lot better than you saw last year at the offensive coordinator spot. And then you bring in Vic Fangio on defense as the DC, who has been a great defensive coordinator in his NFL career. Didn't work out for him as a head coach in his one stint with Denver, but some guys are better coordinators than head coaches, Phil. It's that simple. And I think with Vic Fangio, he's just one of those guys. He's more comfortable as a DC. He's more effective as a DC, just focusing on that side of the football. Some guys aren't capable of wearing all those hats. And when you're a head coach, you not only have to scheme your own side of the ball, but you got to worry about the offense, and you got to worry about the entirety of the football team. It's sometimes a mental drain, right? Mental overload. And sometimes some guys are better off handling it than others. So Vic Fangio at DC, I think, is a great move. After anybody's better than, I think a broomstick could be better at defensive coordinator than Matt Patricia from last year. So anyone was going to be an upgrade. Yeah. But the fact they got Vic Fangio definitely should help. Jalen Hurts, I think when you look at this offensive line, you talk about elite offensive lines that have the potential to be elite. This definitely will be. I think one of the best tackle duos in the league is Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson. Again, Lane Johnson's had injury issues, but when he's on the field, he is just still so good at that spot in the tackle position. Jordan Mailata as well. Again, Johnson's 34. He's getting older a little bit, but still, that's a very good offensive line. I would easily put them in my top 10, maybe fringe top 5. Offensive line for the Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Hurts should have plenty of time. One of the best offensive lines. I know Jason Kelce retiring is a blow. One of the top centers, Pro Bowl center, Hall of Famer. He's probably going to do an awesome job on television now, working on Monday nights with ESPN. But like I said, that offensive line is still good. Cam Jurgens is going to probably have more of an opportunity now as the center. It's a natural position for him. He's now been in the organization for a couple of years. So while you got to replace Jason Kelce, he's a very capable player to do that, especially in time. Like I said, they should have all kinds of time they should be able to give Jalen Hurts all kinds of time. And again, you've got A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, right? You're set as your 1-2 punch at receiver. They're both outstanding. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. You've got another top-tier tight end in Dallas Goedert, of course. So you're loaded in terms of skill position talent. There's no question. And then you actually end up bringing in Paris Campbell. You drafted Johnny Wilson out of Florida State in the draft. So, yeah, skill position weapons aren't an issue at all. You're going to be fine as far as being able to run this offense, get protection, be able to open up holes for the run game. This is going to be a very good offensive team, especially now that you've got an OC that's very experienced, that has had success in other places. So there's a lot to like here with this Philadelphia Eagles team. Saquon Barkley comes in at running back, of course, now to be the bell cow there. And don't forget, you've still got a very capable number 2 at running back, too, to spell off Barkley, or if Barkley gets hurt again, which is a possibility. Let's call it like we see it. I hate calling guys injury prone. I don't want to come on here and say a guy is made of cotton candy and plastic with his body parts. I don't want to say that. It's not fun to see guys get hurt over and over again. I want Barkley to be healthy this year, but you do have Kenneth Gainwell behind him, a guy that's been a very productive running back for the Philadelphia Eagles in the past. So it's good to have that. Not many question marks, Phil, with this offense. On the defense, obviously, we saw that defense get gashed. They struggled down the stretch. Didn't help that, Matt Patricia was there calling plays for this football team on that side of the football. But again, Fangio comes in. They signed Devin White at linebacker. Huge upgrade there, at that position for the Philadelphia Eagles. Nakobe Dean, of course, still very good in that role as well. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson brought in to boost the secondary and improve that. Very, very versatile. So I think when you look at it, Reed Blankenship too, I think he's really come on strong as a safety, and maybe even could be a premier safety this year in the NFL. So like what I've seen out of Reed Blankenship there as well. You look at what they did in the draft as well. They got a couple of good defensive players in the first couple of rounds. No question about that. If you look at the secondary, Darius Slay, I would still say maybe not elite like he was, say, a few years ago, but still an above-average player. James Bradbury, there's been a little hit or miss in his career, but I thought with the Eagles he's played a little better than he did with the Giants in particular. We'll have to wait and see how it goes. Bradbury, though, is another aging guy, so it'll be interesting to see, if that secondary, which I think still could be pretty good, but if you're going to poke holes and say there's one little question mark in Philly's team, and especially their defense, probably would be the secondary a little bit. The pass rush, there's no issues whatsoever. No question about that. Bryce Huff is absolutely outstanding. He had a double-digit sack season last year for the Philadelphia Eagles, no doubt. You're going to have Brandon Graham. You're going to have Nolan Smith. You're going to have Josh Sweat. You actually drafted in a rookie in the 3rd round to really even give that pass rush rotation and that defensive end rotation even more depth. So that's great to see. Like I said, Brandon Graham, don't be fooled by the 35 years old. He still can play at a high level, no question. So Jordan Davis, by the way, tremendous as far as playing against the run on that defensive side of the football. So it'll be interesting to see if he can keep it up for them, keep it going. There's a lot to like with the defense. They should be able to get a pass rush. I think they should be able to stop the run, be very good in the interior of that deep front, led, of course, by Jordan Davis. It's a really good football team on paper. It was a really good football team last year, and they lost their way. There's bad coaching, bad coordinators as far as I'm concerned. It just started to get a little loss of confidence there. The losses accumulated. And then sometimes when you get into this bad rut and you lose confidence, Phil, not just individually, but as a team, sometimes it's hard to get out of that rut, and it just free falls a little bit. And I think that's what we saw with the Eagles. But not only do I think they bounce back, but it's not just me pro-Philly, this opinion. It's me kind of so anti and negative and questioning the other teams in this division as well. Questions about Dallas, questions about the Giants, questions about the Commanders, where I think by default, this is your division winner in 2024 in the NFC East, the Philadelphia Eagles. So of all the futures positions that I've taken in the NFC East, by far the top 2 are Philadelphia over 10.5 wins at minus 130. I believe the juice on that right now, let me see if it's moved at all. It looks like it's minus 140. It's moved up slightly, but no, I still think they go over that win total. Now, the price has moved on their bet on their price to win the division. I was able to get a slight plus price earlier in the summer on Philadelphia to win the NFC East. They're now the favorites. I mean, Philadelphia is minus 125, minus 130 to win the division. So this price has moved quite a bit. And I think it's partially people like Philly people see these growing questions and concerns about Dallas, the other primary competitor for Philly for supremacy in this division. So, yes, I do like Philly to win the NFC East. You got to lay a price now, but I would still only look Philly to win the division, and I like the Eagles over 10.5 wins as well. Phil, what do you think here? Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, I think Nick Sirianni arguably is on one of the hottest seats in the NFL right now, and I think that the hires of Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore are key here. Like you said before, I mean, last year just no creativity with the offense. Jalen Hurts had a really bad year in terms of QBR versus the blitz. That was a problem. Obviously, you're losing Kelsey at the center spot, and Cam Jurgens is making that move from guard to center. So, and I've experienced that before personally, having just a guard who really knows what's going on, make the move to center. Usually, those interior three guys can kind of work it out, and I fully expect Cam Jurgens to kind of be the quarterback of the offensive line there.
They say his natural position, Philip, was center. Jurgens. Okay. So that should help the transition.
Oh, yeah,
even though he was playing guard last year, he's played center before. It was a natural position for him NFL. So
yeah,
it should be a nice transition. It should be an easier transition anyway.
So that helps. Obviously, they have a plethora of weapons there, and Kellen Moore being one of the younger minds of the NFL, offensive coordinator wise, I fully expect him to utilize Saquon Barkley in creative ways. Take a little bit of pressure off of Jalen in terms of just having to sling it around, but he's fully capable of doing that. So offensively, I think this Philadelphia Eagles team is going to be very dangerous and put up a lot of points. So offensive line's looking good and everything. Tyler Steen is the new starter, so they only have one new starter there, looking good there. Defensively, obviously, I think that they're solid. You said they're front seven. They're that defensive line. No issues there. Obviously, they lost the guy to the Jets. What's his name again?
Hassan Reddick. Hassan Reddick, who doesn't want any part of the Jets right now.
Right. So
yeah, Hassan Reddick, them get out.
Yeah, right. So Hassan Reddick, but I don't really expect them to slow down at all there. That secondary is getting a little bit older, but I think that the defensive line should help them out. I think they're solid top to bottom. I fully expect them to be a playoff team and win the NFC East. I'm going to take the over as well with them. I think that's an easy one. But yeah, I think Jalen Hurts overall and Sirianni, I think hopefully they can kind of patch things up a little bit. And I think that they're both they have a little fire under their belly right now, and I think they're ready to go and build off of last year, not let that collapse happen again. So fully expect them to be a playoff team, potentially even a Super Bowl contender. Their schedule is very favorable for them. I think that they have some games in there that should be easy wins. And then
they get the NFC South too, so keep that
too. Yeah. So I could see them winning 12 games this year, really. So I fully expect them to make a comeback and be a Super Bowl contending team.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be a fun team to watch. And from what I'm reading too, want to get back to playing with tempo. Philadelphia 2 years ago when Jalen Hurts was lighting it up, that offense was lighting it up. They were getting to the huddle. They were getting to the line of scrimmage, snapping the football, getting the next play quickly. I think they kind of want to get back to that. They lost their tempo a little bit last year, kind of plodding a little bit, and that speaks to just the downfall a little bit. Now, I think they were poorly coordinated by Johnson last year. They kind of want to get back to playing with a little pace again. So make note when you're betting totals with Philadelphia Eagles games this year, that they might be looking to play with some pace once again, like 2 years ago. One last note I wanted to mention about the Giants, about their totals too. If they face a team, let's say they play a Detroit, right, where you worry about the pass rush that the Giants are going to have with Thibodeau and Burns, but the O-line on the other side is elite and good enough to block it and and keep the quarterback clean to find time down the field, that quarterback's going to pick apart potentially that secondary. So if there's a matchup against an elite offensive line for the Giants where the pass rush could be negated and then that secondary could really get picked on, then maybe you look at the opposing team or their team total over or just the game over the total in general. That's definitely a betting philosophy and betting strategy that I have in mind when it comes to Giants games this year. When they face an O-line that can block up front, that's where the trouble could be. All right, Washington Commanders, our final team here in this NFC East preview. Of course, they bring in former Atlanta Falcons head coach years ago, Dan Quinn, most recently with the Dallas Cowboys as defensive coordinator, who did a pretty solid job until that playoff game. I don't know what happened in the playoff game against Green Bay, but that was a disaster. That was horrendous for that Cowboys defense under Dan Quinn. Nevertheless, he's an experienced coach. He's been a head coach before. He could do worse. I'm like neutral on the high. I don't hate it. I don't love it. But, he's a guy that's got experience. And to be honest with you, I'll say this, even though I'm not the biggest Dan Quinn fan, and I'll be honest, I'm a little bit, recency bias. I just despicable how that defense that he coordinated played against Green Bay in the playoff game last year for the Dallas Cowboys. But I'm telling you what, and I think the world of everything he's had to deal with health-wise, Ron Rivera, but my goodness, he do talk about a downfall in a man as a head coach. And the last few, it's been tough with Ron Rivera. It's been tough because you want the guy to be well. He's a good man from all indications, but when you see him struggle week to week with adjustments, and you see him struggle in game with certain decisions, and the team just keeps losing and just looks taking penalties and all this, and it's a bad reflection on the coach. It's one of those deals, Philip, where you like the guy that is Ron Rivera. You feel for the stuff he's had to battle with his health. But at the end of the day, you've got to evaluate and analyze this objectively as a handicapper that I am here. He did a poor job, unfortunately. I hate to say it. I hate to be, mean to a guy that's a good man off the field. But I've done this before in this role where I'm on these shows talking about all these players and all these coaches. You can be the nicest man in the world, but I've still got to criticize you if you're doing a shit job. It's just the way it is. And unfortunately, it wasn't great. It wasn't good enough for this Washington team under Ron Rivera. So I actually do believe Dan Quinn probably still is a coaching upgrade for this team. Look, the Sam Howell experiment did not go well. They realized pretty quickly Sam Howell's not our future quarterback. And obviously he's no longer there. They end up drafting Jaden Daniels out of LSU with the second overall pick. I did not know how good or bad Daniels was going to be in his first year, and I probably still don't. Maybe I should not overreact to a very small sample size in that preseason game on Saturday afternoon against the Jets. But he came in there in that game, and he made it happen. He made a beautiful throw to set up that touchdown drive. He looked solid. He looked poised. He used his athleticism, got outside the pocket. I mean, I don't want to get crazy about the praise for Jaden Daniels from one drive in a preseason game, but maybe there's some upside there. Maybe there's some potential here for Jaden Daniels. He still has to work on his accuracy and consistency with his accuracy. Even in LSU last year, Phil, he'd miss some wide open guys at times. Yeah. And I still think he's got to polish his pocket passing. That's still an area that he can work on, especially the more deeper throws. That's something I think we're going to have to see with Daniels. Can he work on that over the course of the year? He's an incredible runner and athlete. As far as a dual threat quarterback, he's certainly got that. There's no question. Incredible upside he's got. He's got weapons to work with. Terry McLaurin, of course, one of the, I think, more underrated receivers in the NFL. This guy's a hell of a player, but he plays on a losing team all these years in Washington. He doesn't get the respect he deserves. But Terry McLaurin's a really good receiver. Jahan Dotson really came on strong for this team. There's no question. They do lose Curtis Samuel, who's now in Buffalo with the Bills. But Luke McCaffrey gets taken in the third round from Rice, brother of Christian McCaffrey, a guy that I thought at right. Look, obviously it's a group of 5 school, but very talented. We'll see if it can translate for Luke McCaffrey to the NFL level for him. They bring in Austin Eckler. Not only a good running back, but an elite pass-catching running back. He's been one of the absolute best as far as catching the football out of the running back spot all these years. He's had some injuries. There's no doubt, but he looks 100% coming into this year. It's a nice addition. You put him with Brian Robinson, and all of a sudden you got a decent little tandem there at running back for the Commanders this season. The offensive line, look, they really made a point to upgrade it. We talked about Tyler Biadasz early on, how Dallas is going to miss him. Well, he's now in Washington, and it was a great addition to this offensive line. Nick Allegretti, another nice addition to to this offensive line. Getting him from the Kansas City Chiefs. He knows a thing or two about protecting for a good quarterback, Patrick Mahomes. So Allegretti was a nice addition. Sam Cosmi is a very good guard. All of a sudden, I like the interior. A little more questionable with the tackle spots. I get it. But there's definitely an improved O-line for Washington, no doubt. Going into this year, they look better on the offensive line. You look at the defensive side of the football. They had to bolster the linebacking core. It's been an issue. Bobby Wagner comes in. Now, Bobby Wagner's a little older now, but talk about leadership. Talk about a guy that knows how to play. You bring him in, Frankie Louvu as well, brought into this team at the linebacker spot as well. So big-time additions there. Now they lost a little pass rush last year when Chase Young got dealt, Montez Sweat got dealt. Remember, those were trade deadline trades that the Commanders made. So their pass rush got weakened after that. So they had to do something to address that. But they bring in Dorrance Armstrong, they poach another player from the Dallas Cowboys, bringing him in. And he had a really good season, 7.5 sacks last year. Yeah, he'll help that pass rush a little bit because Washington, especially after they got rid of Sweat in particular, forget Chase Young. Forget him. I mean, he wasn't very good last year anyway. I'm talking about Montez Sweat. When they traded him, the pass rush just sunk like a stone, just went downhill, kaput as far as I'm concerned. Pressure rate down at the bottom of the NFL post-trade deadline last year. But now all of a sudden you bring in Dorrance Armstrong. You're going to get help there. You just need – look, Cleveland Farrell's still there. He's been a first-round pick that hasn't panned out. I'm not going to count on him. I'm not holding my breath that he's going to have a big monster season pass rushing wise. Dante Fowler had 4 sacks last year. We'll see if he can help out as far as the pass rush. But Armstrong will be a key cog so far as getting the pressure on opposing quarterbacks. They still have a great interior on the D-line with the duo of Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen. These two guys, it feels like, have been here forever with this Washington team. So I don't mind them there. Secondary, kind of like the Giants a little bit. I mean, it's pretty crazy, Phil. We talk about the Commanders and Giants, and we put them in this little group here because there's so many similarities where, the Giants, I think their pass rush is better. I think Washington's pass rush is better, and they may need it. Both teams may need it to be better because the secondary's got holes and question marks, and it's the same thing for Washington. Kendall Fuller, who is probably their best corner last year, gone. And you're going to have to find a replacement, and you're going to have to do it with a guy that's second round. That's Mike Sainristil that's going to have to step up and play more. Michael Davis was not great last year. They bring him in from the Chargers. I do like my fellow Canadian, though. I think he's a pretty solid player. I'm not just saying that because he's Canadian. Benjamin St-Juste for this Washington team. I thought he played well down the stretch last year. He'd better play well this year because there's some question marks away outside of him in that secondary spot. There's no question. There's a big competition in the safety position as well because other than Cameron Curl, there's not a lot of proven performers in that safety spot for the Commanders. So big-time questions in the secondary would be a big fear here for Washington coming into this season. You look at the schedule. Again, they get a few games against the AFC North. They as well get the NFC South. They also get a last-place team in 3 of the other divisions in the NFL. So the schedule's manageable here for the Washington Commanders. We see the Giants and their win total where it is, right? 6.5. And I believe we see close to the same win total for the Commanders. And maybe part of it is, well, I saw him look pretty solid in the first preseason game, Jaden Daniels. But if I were to take Giants or Commanders over 6.5 wins, I'd probably take Washington a little bit more as far as the over in this division. I think their schedule is just a little bit easier than the Giants. Can they get to 7-10? I think it's possible. It's especially possible if they hit the mark on Jaden Daniels and if he's ready, to be a C. No, I'm not going to say he's going to be C.J. Stroud in year 1. That's a 1 in 100 shot that a C.J. Stroud in his first year, his rookie year, is going to be that fucking good, like what he was with the Houston Texans last year. I'm not saying Jaden Daniels is going to be that. But if he's going to be solid, serviceable, good, and not great, not amazing like Stroud, but just good, escape pressure, and that O-line is improved, but he's going to have the ability to escape pressure, make plays. He is good as far as outside the pocket. This could be a 7 or 8 win team. It really could be. in this division because the Giants are going to be a winnable game. Dallas has question marks this year, in my opinion. You play the NFC South, all those teams, where it's a hodgepodge of mediocrity, the NFC South. And then you got last place teams in other divisions that are on your schedule if you're Washington. So, yeah, I did grab a little over 6.5 with Washington here over the summer at minus 120, minus 130. I think there is a ceiling that includes them being a 7+ win team this season. Phil, what do you think here? Washington Commanders.
I think this is one of the more exciting teams to watch this year, honestly. I mean, you can't say that they're not trying, with all the acquisitions. Honestly, their offseason has been great, especially compared to the Cowboys, who made very minimal moves here. I really think, Jaden Daniels, I really liked him coming out of LSU. And, there's a lot of talk that we might be having the same conversations as we did last year with all of a sudden the number 2 quarterback actually being better than the number 1. So, obviously I think we saw Caleb Williams put some good stuff on tape, last week in the preseason one, but we did it with Jaden Daniels as well. And so, like you said, as long as he can be just good, nothing crazy, don't turn the ball over, don't take sacks, and just manage the game, I think they're going to be a really good offense. Obviously, they have all these weapons here, Scary Terry, Eckler, Brian Robinson Jr., they have all these great guys. I also, I really liked that Ben Sinnott pick, the 2nd-round draft pick out of Kansas State. I think he's going to be able to help take some pressure off of Zach Ertz and, with their new offensive coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury. He loves the 2 tight end sets. So, I could see him getting some playing time in there. And then obviously the upgrades to the offensive line. So I really think that if things kind of, fall their way, they could get a little momentum as the season goes on. I don't know if they're going to beat the Eagles this year, but I expect them to steal one against the Cowboys and, take care of the Giants and then obviously the NFC South. So that's all good there. Defensively, obviously, Bobby Wagner is a little bit older, but like you said, the leadership aspect of it is huge. He's going to be able to be that anchor, that the quarterback of the defense there. The secondary, obviously a few, losses there, but I think that defensive line should be able to help them out again. You mentioned Jonathan Allen and Darren Payne. Those guys have been there forever. They do a really good job. So Dante Fowler coming in as well. So, I think this could be this could be one of the more surprising teams this year. And I also really do like Dan Quinn. I know that he's kind of had his question marks here and there, but I think he's the right guy for the job, and I can see this team really surprising people. I could see them winning 7-8 games this year, if the ball, bounces their way a few times. So I'm excited to watch this team, to be honest.
There you go.
We got about the Commanders.
Amazing. It's shocking. It's like a miracle here in August. A little optimism for a change regarding the Washington Commanders, right? It's been a while. But yeah, the coaching change, it really deteriorated down the stretch in the Rivera era. There was a disconnect, I think, players and coaches, and you could see that team was just, I don't want to say mailing it in, but ownership was a disaster too. They got the new owner now, a fresh, I think they can be 7-8 wins. In fact, you know what? If I were to say someone's going to push through Philly and Dallas and be a shocking division winner, it would be Washington for me, not so much New York. If you really want to get creative and take the big plus money with the Washington Commanders to shock the world and win the NFC East. I'm not ready to go that far yet, but I will say this. If I'm going to take a shot with my money for a couple of bucks on one of the longer shots in this division to win the division, Commanders 10-1, Giants 12-1, it would be the Commanders for me. Like I said, I think it's going to be interesting, fun to watch. And like I said, Jaden Daniels, the worst thing you can do is overreact to one drive in a preseason game. And I'm not going to do that. But it was pretty damn good against the Jets Saturday afternoon. I put that game. It was early in the day. It was noon. That game started, put it on. And I'm like, holy shit, what a drive this kid put together.
Yeah. Now, I know that long completion that he had, he checked out of a play. He checked out of that and got to that and had that completion. So, I mean, obviously he's seeing things out there. He has command of the offense. Everything I've been hearing is that, all these guys, the veterans on the team have said this guy's come in here with such tremendous confidence. He feels like he belongs. And so just hearing that from the teammates, the buzz around him in training camp, I'm telling you, I think this could be a surprise team.
And you mentioned Ben Sinnott to help out Zach Ertz at the tight end spot. Great story for him. Walked on, Kansas State and turned into a phenomenal tight end there with the K-State Wildcats. So Philip Nelson liking the prospects that Ben Sinnott possibly brings to this Washington offense. There you have it, folks. The NFC East, very interesting division heading into the season. Hit the like button if you're watching on YouTube, and hope you're enjoying all of these college football conference and NFL division preview videos. Still got several more to come. But before we wrap it up, as we always do, and I'm telling you what, Philip Nelson's going to be on this show a shit ton over the next several months throughout the season. He keeps getting better. Like Jaden Daniels, as the season goes on, he gets more reps under his belt.
Exactly.
He get better. And that's Philip Nelson here on Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. With every rep, he's getting better. He's getting more experience, and he's doing a great job. Best bets for the NFC East. Phil, we'll start with you. What do you like here for your NFC East best bet?
You know what? I think you're going to like this one. I did a little research here, and NFC East plus 350 to bet Eagles first place, Cowboys second place, Commanders third place, Giants fourth place. I really like that bet. I mean, plus 350. I think that's a pretty solid, division rankings through there. I could totally see that happening. So plus 350 for that, the NFC East to finish in that order.
What a creative best bet that is from Philip Nelson right there. So that is a
More
correct
reps, right?
order.
More reps.
I know, exactly. No, that's great. It's outside the box thinking. I honestly don't do a lot with the sequencing bets, because I know there's people that bet this team versus this team in the Super Bowl, or this team to finish first, or a 1-2 finish in the division. You can also bet like 1-2 finish in the division as well. Those kind of bets, 1-2 in the conference. But that's a good one, and that's plus 350. So Philip Nelson's going with correct order of finish in the NFC East this season. Philadelphia first, Dallas second, Washington third, New York Giants fourth at plus 350. So there you go. Very creative best bet here in the NFC East from Philip Nelson. Mine's a little more straightforward. We're going to take the Philadelphia Eagles to win the NFC East, minus 125. I know the price isn't as good as the price I got on it about a month and a half ago, but still very playable, and I still think they win this division. Too many questions with Dallas, even though Dallas could still be in the mix. And we think Washington could be better, but I don't know if they're division winner ready yet at this stage of the season. So for me, it's Philadelphia, still on paper, the team to beat in the NFC East. Eagles to win the NFC East for me, minus 125. That'll be my best bet here for this NFC East season preview video. Great stuff with Philip Nelson. Shout out to everyone again. Hope you enjoyed this NFC East preview video. We've got many more on the way, so make sure you stay tuned to Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy for the rest of the month as we continue to produce these season preview videos in both NFL and college football. For Philip Nelson, I'm Ian Cameron. Thanks for watching the NFC East season preview video right here on Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.